welcome to Shop Talks, which is a production of the Ink Kitchen and our sponsors, Los Angeles Apparel, Styles, Transfer Express, Hirsch, and Easy Way. And this show, Impressions, they all make it free. I'm Rick Roth from the Ink Kitchen. Check out our YouTube channel. We have all kinds of videos of these talks. They're all free as well. We have a website, inkkitchen.com, with free information, most of it accurate. Thanks for coming. We're going to talk a little bit, then we're going to give an opportunity for you to ask questions. And then if you're shy, we will hang around afterwards and you can ask questions in private as well. I have with me Nick Buettner, who's from ICW. He's an expert in DTF and sublimation and what?
ISW.
What did I say?
ICW.
No, ISW. Oh, damn, it's recorded. Yeah, from ISW. And so we're going to talk a little bit about DTF, and like I said, we'll give you a chance to ask questions afterwards. All right, so Nick, DTF is the rage. What is going on now, and what's going to be happening in that space of DTF, and how crazy is it going?
Okay, good questions. So DTF has come a long way since its inception here in the U.S. market, right? It came over from China, and at the beginning, all we had was Chinese machines, and there was a lot of uncertainty, and there was very little tech support. But I think it's taken the next step. We've got Japanese players now in the game with Mamaki and Epson offering models for DTF specifically geared for that. I think that the Chinese machines are in iteration 4 or 5 now, so you've got a lot of improvement that's happened, a lot less incidents of failure. The support has gotten better in the industry, so just by virtue of the numbers, more people are informed, more people know how to work successfully with the technology now. So I think that's a big hurdle that the technology had to overcome. As far as what's new or what's coming in the DTF world, I think you have more heads, faster machines, more colors. So introducing beyond the CMYK spectrum, introducing neon gamut, introducing specific spot colors like RGB, red, green, blue, sorry. Those things allow us with a pigment technology like DTF to expand the gamut, the number of colors that we can reproduce, right? So one of the big limitations with DTF or DTG is the fact that it's a pigment ink technology, digital pigment ink, and so the gamut with digital pigment ink isn't really impressive when you look at the options you have with screen printing, right? With screen printing, we can get just about any color. And the ones we can't buy, we mix ourselves, right? So with DTF, we don't have that option. So adding extra colors to the ink set is expanding the colors that you can print, which is giving you a more accurate representation of what screen printing can do. Because ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, right?
Yes. So we want to get a little more at the future in a minute, but let's dial it back a little. For someone that's just getting into DTF, what do they want to look for in a machine, and what do they want to look, it's a leading question here, what do they want to look for in the person selling the machine?
Yeah. So the machine, I think you want, a lot of times people reference Facebook forums. I think that's a great way to get information, get the dirt on a lot of the people out there, so you can see if some guy's out there selling a machine and everybody's saying, hey, there's no support and this machine doesn't work and how do I do this? That's probably not a good machine for you to buy. The person is a big part of it. If all the machines are coming from China and we know they're all in their 4th or 5th generation, then all that technology, I don't want to say it's equal, but it's a lot closer to equal than it was when it began, right? So we're not seeing as much of the lower quality equipment getting into the market because it's already been kind of vetted by the general populace. Like, hey, that's no good, don't buy it, right? So then that leads you to the person selling the machine. So the person selling the machine is a lot of times just a salesperson. Most of those guys that are selling the machines, but they don't run the machine. They know about the machine because they read about the machine in the brochure, or they know about the machine because it's in their demo room and they've used it a few times. That's not the person that's going to be on the phone with you when you can't figure it out. There's a technical support team that has to support you when you're down. What does that look like? You don't get to meet them at the show. You get to meet the guy that's going to sell you the machine, who you may never talk to again, right? So be careful.
Especially if it's a bad machine, you'll never talk to them.
Exactly. So
Might be really hard to reach.
you got to be careful. You got to be guarded when you go out to make a purchase. I know we're at a show, and traditionally the Fort Worth show has been a good buying show. People buy here. I would caution you to shop here, but maybe buy after the show, after you've had a chance to really ask the probing questions. If you're getting into this for the first time, if you're already in the DTF space or in the DTG space and you know what you know about the equipment and you know what you know about the process, then you probably have the right questions to ask right now and know to ask to see what kind of support am I going to be dealing with. Let me talk to some customers. Let me get some testimonials. Let me talk to people that run your equipment.
Yeah, some references I think are a good idea. And sometimes, like you said, the techs aren't available, but sometimes at the show they are actually.
They are.
If they set the machine up, you might want to make sure you talk to them, not just the salesperson, right?
And ask them questions that they can't just skirt around. Like, hey, in this system, what parts do you see failing in the first year? What are the most common mistakes that people make with this system? How many times do you go and visit somebody when they buy a system from you? Are you there for the installation, or is it a remote installation? There are just a lot of questions that you want to ask, because if you don't ask them and they don't tell you, then whose fault is it?
All right, let's one more beginning question. What do you need to know, or what level of knowledge do you need to have to operate a new DTF machine that you have, in terms of getting the files to the machine, etc.?
Okay, so I would liken it to any other technology. The process is still the same. We still have to start over here and create artwork, and then we have to get that artwork machine ready, meaning the layers have to be correct and so forth. Then we have to output. In the case of Japanese machines, they have a user interface, which is a software that operates on your laptop to do most of the function in the machine, whereas a typical US machine or a Japanese machine, they have a front panel. You can do most of what you want through the front panel. The Chinese machines don't put all that technology in the machine. They use the UI so that they can just put that software on a computer and run the machine that way. So that's a little bit different. It's a different step. We see it in some of the big equipment out there in the market where they have a UI to operate the machine, like the DGI printers. So it's not uncommon, but I think it's different. If you're used to running your machine at home and you click print, it comes out of the printer over here, it's different. You're now using a RIP software. You're now using a user interface to do nozzle checks and things like that. So it's a little bit more advanced. I would say if you don't have any training, there is a lot of collateral on the web. So you can go to YouTube, you can go to places and get the information. But ultimately, I'd be looking for someone that was going to do the install and was going to include a training with that install. And I would suggest, in order to maximize the value, that you have artwork ready, that you have jobs that you want to complete while the trainer is there, so you run into real-world problems. Not, hypothetically, this could happen, so then you would do this. That doesn't work.
So if you're buying a DTF machine, it does a lot of things well. What does it do well, and what does it maybe not do that people aren't ready to find out?
Yeah, so the DTF machine, being a pigment-based printer with white ink, I think the thing that most people aren't really prepared for is the heads clogging, is the amount of fallout, nozzle dropout, right? When that happens because you're not using the machine enough or you're not cleaning the machine properly, I think that's the thing that people aren't really ready for. It's not a bad technology. You just have to keep up with the maintenance. You have to do, in some of the other technologies, we tell you, you should clean the machine every day, or you should clean the machine every week. Whatever we tell you, that is the recommendation, and a lot of times it's not followed. And with a sublimation printer or your proofing machine, it probably is okay to sit for a couple of weeks and then start it up and you do a couple of cleanings and everything's fine. But with titanium dioxide in the ink and it being so heavy and it falling out of suspension and that clogging up your heads, those heads don't come back. I mean, some of them come back, but it's less than likely that you'll have your head back on the white head. Now, all of these machines, not all, most of these machines have multiple heads. You'll have a color head and you'll have a white head, or you'll have two color heads and you'll have two white heads. So the white heads are the more problematic and are the ones that require more attention.
I noticed a lot of people now, they buy those hot dog rollers and disconnect the heater, and they agitate slowly the white ink. Is that what's that about?
I've seen that. I've seen them put the little magnetic spinning device on the chemistry set and stick that in the ink. So before you put the white ink in your machine, you want to make sure it's fully in suspension. In other words, all of the titanium dioxide, all the pigment, everything is suspended in the ink. So it's all liquid. It's not some liquid and some sediment. That sediment will ruin your machine. It'll start by clogging up the filters in your dampers, which will prohibit the ink from getting to the head. When the ink doesn't get to the head, the ink that's still in the head dries up and the head is garbage.
Anything else you can do to keep the machine running well, or tips to like?
Yeah, so following the maintenance regimen. When you're not using the machine, it's probably a good idea to wet cap the machine. A lot of people just use a distilled water. If you're concerned and you're leaving the machine for a longer period of time, you'd want to use a glycol based so that it doesn't dry up. If I use distilled water, even though the head's sealed, it's going to dry up over time, whereas a glycol is going to stay wetter longer. If the machine's going to be sitting for an extended period of time, you might even be using something with a little bit of a cleaning agent in that so that it sits in that and keeps the head open.
Is there any way to fix a clogged head?
There are ways to try and fix a clogged head. It would start with the head staying in the machine and us doing things like wet capping with a stronger cleaner, letting that sit for a period of time so that I try and break up whatever's clogged at the surface of the print head. So the nozzle goes like so. So it gets smaller at the bottom. So if I create a cleaner at the bottom there to try and break up that where that thin ink film is that it may have clogged the head, that typically works. If it's a more severe head clog, you can take the head out of the machine and you can soak it in a cleaner. You can use a waterfall technique, which is pushing the cleaner through the head or pushing the water through the head to try and clean the head out. Then there's maybe the last ditch, which would be using some sort of a machine, creating a frequency to try and break up the particulates that are stuck in the head.
What are the optimum, I don't know if it's the same for all machines, but the optimum conditions in the room that you run the DTF, that's some concern as well, right?
Yeah.
In terms of climate control?
Yeah, so a typical printer, when we have a printer, is just a printer. It doesn't throw a lot of heat. But when we have a DTF machine, we have an oven alongside it, right? So we got to cure the inks. So when we're trying to figure out the environment that the machine needs to sit in, the machine wants to be in the same environment that all the other printers want to be in. If you have a digital printing device, it wants to be around 50% humidity. That's where they like to live, or maybe even a little north of that. It likes to be around the same temperature you like to be. It doesn't want to be in a 60-degree temperature. It doesn't want to be in a 90-degree temperature. You're happy at 71 degrees, then it's happy at 71 degrees. So I think a lot of people lose sight of that. I think a lot of people try and put these systems in their warehouse. You can't control the environment in your warehouse. It's a massive space. So I would recommend the printer live in a climate-controlled space where it can be run properly. I've even seen people put up a wall in between the printer and the oven, right? So that they're printing over here in this climate-controlled room, and the oven lives over here in their warehouse, which is kind of cool.
Very interesting. We have that actually for a DTG. We have the oven go out of the room.
It also keeps, well, it helps on the heating and cooling, but it really helps keep down on the powder mess as well, because that's all happening on that side. So powder is not your friend as far as, you know, the residue and leaving a mess everywhere. So being able to use the powder in the warehouse setting and keep the print room more like a clean room is excellent.
So what's the future? You were talking to me a little bit before of, well, a few things about the future. Let's talk about the adhesives. I know there's not just one adhesive, there's many adhesives. I wonder what's going to happen on that front, and then what's going to happen in terms of reproducing like halftones and so forth.
Yeah, so we were talking earlier about the fact that, you know, these machines, I think the future is there are over 300 different types of hot melt powder made, right? That's the adhesive powder that we use. So we aren't using 300 types of powder in this business, right? There are certain powders that are catered to specific applications. So maybe those wouldn't be so prevalent in the general market, but I do believe there are powders out there and there are examples of people getting smarter with the powder they're using. So powder comes in 3 different size categories. Let's call it small, medium, and large. The small category of powder was designed to be mixed with an ink and be used as a printable adhesive. It's used commonly in screen printing, in screen transfer, sorry. So it's not meant for DTF, but we see it oftentimes in the DTF space because it creates such a thin layer of adhesive that it creates a really soft transfer. So people are like, yeah, I want the small powder. Well, the small powder also goes airborne, so it's very dangerous. You can't use the small powder. You have to mix the small powder in ink in order to use it. If you're using it in your shaker, it's going to create a cloud of powder that you're going to be breathing in, which is horrible. So don't use the small powder. What I have seen, and that's 0 to 80 micron, what I have seen people do, which is very clever, is come out with a, let's call it a small medium powder size, where they're using the medium size powder, but they're only using the granule size from 80 to 110 micron instead of going all the way up to 160 or 180 micron. That's big because it's actually creating that thin layer, but it's also not going airborne. So it's safe, but it gives you a very soft transfer. Better coverage of the adhesive with smaller granule size, right? Then the large adhesive is nice because the large granule size never hangs out on your film after it gets hit with the little beater bar because there's more weight to that granule. And so when the little bar hits the film, it actually knocks the molecule off where it's not supposed to be sticking to wet ink. So I think that's worthy of note. I think a lot of people will run the medium size or the small size, and they'll have a lot of adhesive in your non-image area. So when you're having to cut the images out, having to stay real close to the image to not have that adhesive transfer where it's not supposed to be there. So if that's happening, your moisture is probably too high in your environment, and you're using too small a granule of pigment or of powder.
So how are these machines, you were telling me there's advances in the machine that will allow halftones to be printed better, because I was like, well, one advantage of DTGs, you can do halftones, and you were saying that maybe that's going to be changing, right?
Yeah, so you can do halftones with DTF. I think where you run into issues in the DTF space is a lot of people, when they set up these machines, aren't making the machine tight to tolerance, right? These digital machines can put a drop on top of a drop. So if I can put a drop on top of a drop, why can't I do a halftone? We see the softwares have the options to create the halftones. The reason you can't do a halftone is because people don't have it registered properly, and the white stays outside the color just a hair. When you're doing a halftone, now you're seeing that hair hundreds of times, and it's getting smaller and smaller. It's evident. You can see it. If the machine were perfectly registered, the white would be hiding behind the color, and you wouldn't see any of it.
Is there a limit for the adhesive sticking to a small point, though?
Correct, yes. So you wouldn't be using large granule size adhesive. You'd be using a system that wasn't maybe beating the film We talked a little bit about the polyprint system. So it's an expensive system, but it's a system that's utilizing the shaker, well, it's not even a shaker, the powder technology from the screen transfer world. So if you look at screen transfer and the big cylinder presses, all of that technology, they're using a big powder machine that waterfalls the powder, then uses an air blade and a vacuum to remove the excess and recirculates it after it filters it back into the powder, right? So that's how those machines work in the real screen transfer world. The shaker little beater bar model, that's so that you don't, the machine for, the powder machine for screen print is like a $30,000 machine. So you're not going to find that on a machine you're paying $12,000 for, right?
So DTF, I think there's some obvious reasons that it's been adopted. It's inexpensive, the materials and the machines, works on all kinds of fabrics. It's pretty quick.
Easy workflow.
Yes.
No weeding.
All right. Not so hard to prepare art for it. What's it not good for?
I think it's not good for the short run, right? If you're that little shop that's going to have somebody come in and say, I want 2 transfers. Well, now I have to set the machine up and run the machine, get it webbed up, and then I got to print my 2 transfers, and those have to run through the dryer, so I'm wasting more film. So I waste 6 feet of film on the front, I print my 2 transfers, and 6 feet of film on the back. It's not real good for that. Now, if you have lots of jobs, if you have this guy wants 2 transfers and she wants 1 and you want 8.
No, she doesn't want any.
She wants 1. I could tell she wants.
No, I can tell she doesn't. She's a screen printer.
So the bottom line is, if you're able to gang the work together and have an actual workflow where you can run the machine, it's good. The other thing it's not good for is the guy that doesn't have enough work to run the machine. So if you're not
the heads.
If you're not running the machine, the heads are going to clog, and then you're going to be spending money to keep the machine running, even though you're not running the machine. So, the thing about DTF, and I love that it's been adopted so widely in the industry, it's great. There's somebody in your town, there's several people in your town that have several of these machines and would love for you to buy transfers from them, right? So if you're not at the level where it makes sense to own the machine, you can find somebody local to buy the transfers from. Or you can buy from Transfer Express or F&M or any of these guys they've adopted this
You
technology.
definitely want to buy them before you go into the machine, I think.
100%.
All right, let's questions. So the question, all right, so what level of business do you think before you should buy your own printer?
That is an interesting question. So it would be a math exercise for me. I would run the numbers like, this is what it costs me to produce, which you can get from all the people selling the machines, right? And then I would see how much it's costing me to purchase the transfers. And when it made sense based on the payment for the machine plus my cost of the transfers to switch over to doing them myself, I would do it. That would be the function, because as far as volume, you're talking hundreds of transfers a week. I mean, that's...
Yeah, I think the other thing is, like, do you think you're going to run it every day or close to every day, I would say?
Yeah, you want it running 5 days a week. If you're running 7 days would be great, but most of us like our weekends, right? So 5 days a week, that machine should be running. Doesn't have to run all day, but you should have work for it every day, or you shouldn't have the machine.
I'd say one other thing. It's funny, all these technologies, people are like, oh, DTG is going to replace screen printing, DTF's going to... They're great adjuncts. We're screen printers on the whole, but they're great adjuncts. They solve a lot of problems. You don't want to screen print on some weird collar or something like that. Transfers solve a lot of problems that you don't really want to deal with. And then it's also the turn. If you have your own machine, I don't know, we're busy screen printing thousands of shirts, and we have an important customer that wants 24 shirts with some words on it. We just run transfers now, and we don't have to tie up those expensive machines. I think the ease of it, and then, it's great to order from stalls and those places, but sometimes you don't have time. It's really great for the emergencies. Really great for the emergencies.
Yeah, I look at DTF as another tool for the toolbox, right? If you're a mechanic and you work on Fords, you have to have all the tools to work on Fords. When someone shows up with a Toyota, you don't have those tools, so you got to turn that person away. Somebody shows up with their Hyundai. No, I can't help you. I can only work on Fords. Maybe my Ford stuff, some of it works on the Chevys, but I can't work on your foreign car. Same thing as a screen printer saying, okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. If I add a DTF, I broaden the offering. Now I can say yes to more people. I add sublimation, I can say yes to more people. I add DTG, I can say yes to more people. So it's all about being able to say yes, and if you don't add it in-house, add the ability to outsource it. I mean, it's not hard. There's plenty of people doing all those technologies.
All right, what about a new versus used printer?
So I just, at the beginning, talked about the different iterations and that we're on like Gen 4 or 5 from China. Gens 1, 2, and 3 all had all kinds of problems, and that all happened in a couple of years, right? Normally technology coming out of Japan, it's got an 18-month plus life cycle, right? Even our phones, 18 months, new iPhone, right? So I think with print technology, typically the life cycle's been much longer. You don't have a new model come out, you're going to have a printer for 5 years before they come out with a new printer. So with DTF, I've seen the printers change 5 times in 2 years. That's different. So buying a used machine, you might end up buying one of those machines that had a lot of the issues. The other thing is pigment ink. We already went over it. Not good for print heads. Tends to cause clogging, right? And when things aren't properly maintained. So with used machines, that machine has to be decommissioned properly, meaning get all the ink out of it and be sitting there with no ink in it. If it's sitting there with ink in it and the guy hadn't been using it, you already know it needs 2 heads. So heads are expensive. The technology is not very expensive. So it's hard for...
It depends what you're doing. I mean, if you're doing like Little League shirts or something that like, or some kind of work that's not really critical, maybe it would work, you know?
I think the problem, though, is if there's a head problem,
Oh, yeah, that's...
if you're
oh, yeah.
missing nozzles, you're not going to print right. It's going to be banded. It's going to look like crap. So there's no way to use a broken machine in DTF. So you're gonna go down a rabbit hole you might not want to go down.
Yeah, broken, no. Old technology, maybe. Old, probably not.
Old technology with a heat press, yes. Old technology with a printer, again, for me it would be what type of printer? DTF, 99% no. You know, sublimation, a proofing device, maybe I would buy one of those used, but...
Agreed. Question?
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, are you guys in the DTF market currently, or are you looking to get into the Just getting into it. Okay. So I'll give you the Cliff's Notes. The Cliff's Notes were make sure that you ask the questions of the person you're buying the machine from. Make sure you meet who's going to be doing your tech support. Make sure you ask, are you doing the install, or am I getting this machine and somebody on a screen and I'm doing the install? Because that makes a difference, right? A lot of what separates the good from the bad in the DTF space is the support you're going to get from the people you buy it from.
That's the biggest one, I think. Why is this more expensive? And it's because they're going to support it. I mean, yeah, my son works for one of them. I'm not going to say who, but it's like they have a ton of support. They will, if you have a problem with your machine, if you can't use it because you're just not educated enough, they're going to help you through all of that. And that costs money. And so that's why it's going to be more.
Understand the layers of support too, right? You bought it from company X. So company X is giving you the immediate support. Who's supporting company X? I work for a master distributor. We have 3 full-time techs on staff. They support our distributors. And then the manufacturer supports us as well. So there are 3 levels of support for that customer versus a model where maybe the dealer doesn't know how to support them at all, and the only support you would get is from the manufacturer. And if the manufacturer is in China and they're not open during the hours you're open, that becomes a big problem to get the support you're looking for, right? So ask the questions before you make the purchase. One of the things I said, and I'm sure the vendors here love it, is shop here, but maybe you don't buy at the show. Don't feel pressured into making a purchase decision because somebody says, oh, you can save $500 if you buy it from me here now. Well, are you really saving money if it takes you 6 months to be able to figure out how to get that technology working? The curve, the learning curve is a big factor that people don't factor into their buying decision. And I think it's one of the biggest.
Amen. All right, let's leave on that note. All right, we're going to stick around, though, if you have questions afterwards.
Thank you.
I want to thank Nick Buettner again. Did I say your name right? Yes, you did. Nick Buettner from ISW. And thank our sponsors, Los Angeles Apparel and Stalls, Easy Way, and Hirsch. And I'm from the In Kitchen. Check out our YouTube channel. This will appear on the YouTube channel eventually. Check out our website, inkitchen.com, all free. Thanks to Impressions, and thanks for coming.